Hello.
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 Hi.
Hi everyone. Hi chat. How's everyone doing today? So a bit of a disclaimer to begin with. So I wanted to test out Windows 11 and I forgot how to set up the chat and the alerts. So if you don't see those, that's on me. I'm sorry guys. So today, in this, I don't know what number I'm doing already on the Resin talk, but today I'm with the bench from HungerWorkStudio.
Hello. So because some things aren't working, you could say it's like a 60% stream.
40%. Do you use 40%? Yeah. I mean, could be better.
I'm an ortho ergo kind of guy, but yeah, like we have pretty small hand-sized keyboards for sure.
Right. So how is everyone's weekend going? How was your week, Bench?
The week was pretty good. It was a very busy week. I had to meet family kind of across the state. We've all been isolating, so it's the first time that I've seen my brother and my mother in person, even at a distance, in 2 years. And that was big. So getting out of the house was exciting. But we've done a lot of like local consulting. Businesses are starting to open back up, and I used to do things locally like teach. And some people wanted to know if I could do larger resin work for them, and so we did some in-person, masked kind of estimates and consultations. And we then just did work on other projects that we have going, like the Demonic Duvet Meet Popsy Skull sale for Halloween, and some commissions that we recently took on. So very busy week, exciting. Lots of late nights, early mornings. Good stuff.
All right. So people are starting to get here. That's pretty nice to look. Hi everyone. Hey Capto, hey Dragstar, Voodoo. So, oh man, I want to start already, but I want to wait for a bit more people to get in here, before we start asking stuff.
Sure. I'm gonna ping in my Discord and just tell people it's up and
live.
Yeah.
All right. But yeah. Hey Cap, so I know I didn't post it I didn't do any publicity. It was last minute, guys. So I literally asked him on Monday, and then I asked him again on Thursday, and I was like, I forgot to tell you. So here we are, guys. Last minute.
I totally forgot to get back to your boy Ark here, because I said I'd get back to touch with him on Wednesday, but
things happen, man. You're a busy man.
He's good.
I mean, that's the thing that I hate the most, doing follow-ups, because I don't want to be like, oh no, what if he's being annoying, right? Like, in my head, it's like, I don't want to be annoying. That's how I see it sadly.
I'm used to it, man. I'm used to it. That's something that you've got to do to be professional. If somebody's going to get upset with you for following up after 24 hours, then I mean, come on.
Oh, man.
If you ever want to talk with me and I say, hey, I'll get back to you, like, don't take that as a passive aggressive, like, get out of my face, man. Like, it really, I do. I can get kind of busy, and I'm old. I'm not quite as sharp as I used to be.
I can relate to that a bit. I mean, yeah, I can see that. So I just don't like bothering in general. So, but I'm trying, right? Like okay, I want to get this interview done, so I'm gonna follow up with him, and here we are, boys.
I have been known to play a Warframe or two.
Really? I never got into it. I played for a month because I was being competitive with another friend. So I would only play just to be above them basically. and that lasts like a month. But
Real
that's
life trolling right
basically,
there
yeah,
in a free to play like
yeah,
cooperative game.
yeah.
I guess you can go head to head with somebody in that game. A friend of mine and I like to do damage tests to see who can just get the highest
Mhm.
number value on the screen or wipe the largest number of enemies in one go. Um, but there isn't a heck of a lot left for us to do in the game anymore. I was playing since it was in beta, so been at it a long time.
Yeah, that's. I mean, you have been here a long time too in this hobby, right?
Yep. This is my 14th year in
Yeah.
the keyboard hobby and my um, 8th year as like practicing artisan keycaps.
Um, they're asking if there's any possibility to find this synced 3D model somewhere to buy it. I don't think that's possible, right? I don't think you offer that.
No, we don't release the Synth 3D model. It's not an open source platform because uh, a lot of the technology that existed to make it, we had to develop it before molding knowledge or mold systems or even publicly visible. A lot of the old makers, Brocaps and Clack and whatnot, they kept everything under wraps. You couldn't see anything about the platforms and how they worked. So the Synth was the first publicly available platform, and we take the proceeds from the physical sales and we send those right back into Salvin and into the machine shops that keep this going, because we want the part to be as high quality as possible. With a 3D printed piece, you will never get the kind of stability that we want the end user to have. We want people to be able to use hot medium. So things like polymer clay or UV cure resins, like directly on top of the piece without it interfering with the integrity or warping the base or anything like that. So these are really durable. They're supposed to be made by a specific way, and we make sure that everybody involved in the process is properly compensated for their time. That's why we have it in the structure that it's in right now.
I mean, that's going to be like an interesting topic to talk, like comparing your system with something like CBUD, right? Like, I think that that allowed many makers, even myself. Like, I'm not a pro maker like you, but I have made some artisans, and I think that was the easiest way that I had, like, be able to get into, casting and getting molds. I haven't tried out your system sadly yet, but I would love to eventually. But I think that's something we can talk about.
Oh
Down
yeah,
the
for
line.
sure. And I mean, honestly, if I cautioned against new people using the synth just because they felt like they had to have it to get into artisan keycaps. I like there being alternatives. The best solution is to teach yourself how to make a two-part mold. If you understand how from the ground up to just take a flat platform and build a box around it, put your part in and learn what it is to make a mold, you'll understand the process so much better than having your hand held by one of these pre-made keycap mold systems, because they don't tell you how or why everything is working the way it does. The best teacher is honestly to do it from the ground up.
Right.
And it costs you no more than a couple Legos to figure out how to do that.
True.
The earliest way that people were making things, even when the synth was being released the first time around, because we could only make maybe 50 of them like a year at that time, and they were stupid expensive. When that was happening, we were advising people to use a flatbed of Legos, and there were the Lego tops that don't have the bits on top, the flat plain pieces.
Right.
If you take a 2x2, it's just about the size of a keycap. So you can use that as a stand. So you put a 2x2 flat onto Legos, and then you put some clay underneath your keycap.
Right.
Put that onto the 2x2 flat, build a box around it, fill it up with silicon. Take the key and the mold apart, take the clay out from the underside of the key, put the key back in, spray with mold release, pour in your second silicon with a new wall around it, and you've got yourself a 2-part mold. You don't even need to bother 3D printing. The parts are cheap, reusable. ABS is naturally incompatible with silicon. It's also incompatible with resin, so you can make a lot of mistakes with Legos, and it won't damage them whatsoever. They're not liable to break or snap or crumble or anything like that under any of these products. So for me, a lot of the resin printed 3D things or certain FDM just don't make sense because they're so textured, and the texture can come through in your end molds. Any deep texture in your molds will cause them to fail faster than if they had a smooth surface. And if you're not familiar with going back and like finishing a mold with like some paintable silicon or anything like that to smooth out those points, it can lead to early mold death just from having those things in it. So
I didn't know about silicone paint. I never heard of that.
It's called brushable silicon. It's so viscous that it doesn't move from where you put it. So you would get it, mix it up, put it on a small brush, and paint it in place. And as long as you paint it so it's like it's not on a 90-degree face, it will set wherever you place it, and it will set glossy because that's what the silicon does. If you were to just take silicon and pour it out, you've seen the top of that. It just looks glossy. If you paint it on and you leave it set, it'll set glossy, and so you'll get rid of a lot of those lines. And these are things that you would only really pick up on if you got to learn the molding materials themselves before diving into the pre-designed molding solutions that we've made. That I think they really help get people who are a little bit more experienced further faster. Doing it the first time, I'm not back in your position, so I honestly don't know what it's like. So I'm not really quite sure what the best way to start is. Is it best to learn 2-part molding, and it could be a little pedantic to do that.
It can be maybe like what's your goal, right? Maybe what's your goal while making articles, right? Like, do you actually want to understand like all the parts and systems, or you just want to make something for yourself, right? Make something that you want to try it out and see if it works, right? I don't know. Like, to me, I get what you're saying, right? But for example, I just wanted to sculpt something, see if I can actually sculpt and see if I can actually cast it, right? That was my goal. But like, I didn't have the mentality like you're saying right now of experimenting, trying to see, like, understanding all how silicone works, how resin works, right? So I guess it can be both ways, right? It can be what's your end goal.
Oh yeah, I mean, however a person chooses to approach the situation, I'm not trying to say that there's a right or wrong way to go about it. I think, though, once you get to a certain point, you're going to realize that you have to understand some things, or it's always going to be a struggle. Even with a tool that is open source and freely available, and you can just print out another one if it gets destroyed, like ZBut, there's going to be a lot of time that a person will spend if they don't understand why they're making certain kinds of errors. And it all goes back to, what does it take to make a 2-part mold? That's the solution that we came up with years ago to make complicated, multifaceted molded shapes. And so far, there really hasn't been better solution than having two separate parts. So understanding why and how that works ends up becoming the focal point in
Right.
progressing beyond that trial phase. So if you just want to try it out, sure. I don't think anybody's going to end up being like hello caps or prime caps or something if they don't really understand the foundational
Right.
theories and practices behind the materials that you're using. And I think that using something like these could actually get in the way of wanting to learn that for real. Maybe. I don't know. Yeah.
I think we
I developed the system. So.
Yeah, well, true. I think we jumped way too deep at the beginning without actually like getting to know you first, right? Like, so you told me your name is Robert, right? Like, what was your life before like getting into mechanical keyboards in this hobby, right? Like,
Mhm. I've done a lot of stuff. Work-wise, I've worked for telecommunications companies. I've worked as a contractor for the federal government. When I was a teenager, I worked as a carnival employee. I've done a lot of different kinds of jobs, but I've always been interested in technology. And one of the things that I absolutely hated about my my long-standing relationship with computers was keyboards. And that's because the first time I built a keyboard, or I'm not a keyboard, sorry. Just rewind. Okay, the first time I built a computer was in 1995. And that was in the era of like Rubber Dome,
right,
your old Dell or Hewlett Packard, or oh gosh, what was Keytronic? Was one of the old Rubber Dome makers, and the biggest issue was that they were made to be sold for anywhere from $10 to $35 a piece. So they had pad printed legends, and I work with I have worked with a lot of chemicals, being interested in art, and for whatever reason, my finger oil is like I can wipe paint off of stuff if I try hard enough with my hands. It's kind of gross. So I wash my hands a lot, but any regular pad printed keyboard, I will chew through the legends in maybe 6 weeks.
Oh, okay.
So one of the reasons why I wanted to get into mechanical keyboards was, one, my keyboards kept dying, and two, I kept rubbing the legends off of anything else that didn't have double shot or die sub legends. And that was just unacceptable after years and years and years and years of just sending keyboards to the recycling center because there were no replacement keycap sets. You just couldn't get them. They didn't exist, so you have to get a new keyboard.
More. Right.
And I was brokering like pallets of CPUs to like South America and the Russian Federation and whatnot in the early 2000s, and I came across some people talking about like getting a vintage keyboard like a Unicomp, which was a remake of the IBM Model M. And then people talking about some of the Chinese OEMs and the brand names that were using, like CoStar, for example. Philco was a CoStar rebrand and things like that, and they were just higher quality keyboards. And my focus went from like learning a lot about motherboards and CPUs and GPUs and computer parts and building custom computers for people completely into typing, because I was so impressed at what a difference it made to not have to worry about my keyboard breaking, to really feel good about typing on what I was typing on.
Like an experience, right?
Yeah. And so that that became a real passion, and I just pursued interacting with anybody who had the same interest. And a lot of the people who were into that were vintage keyboard collectors and upcyclers. So that was people who were finding old keyboards that were being recycled and then repurposing them. And the only real way that you could do that was with a good mechanical keyboard, because there was no point in upcycling something with rubber domes, really. And it just grew and grew and grew and grew, and I got to know the community, and I experienced like Clack coming out and saying, you know, I have this beautiful, he had a beautiful vintage collection of keyboards. I'm a keyboard community member just like you, but check this out. I made this, and it's going to be on sale on Elite Keyboards. And I was like, you know, I really want to get some nice lunches this week, so I'm going to pass on that. And I didn't get a Clack from 2010 to about 2015.
Okay.
I didn't get like, anything. Nope. Yeah, I tried to later, but I couldn't, because
oh boy,
you know, they got to be very popular. And by about 2013 is when I said, you know, I think, given my background, I can probably do this. I can probably figure this out and tell people more about what's going into it. Maybe not exactly what Clack does, but certainly what I would do to solve this problem. And so I wrote a guide, and many other makers have written really good guides since then, like Keyforge and Booper. Zorb,
right.
Zorb Caps, did a really good detailed instructional, and that's kind of where things started growing from as more of like a community art form. I think it really started with Clack saying, you know, here's kind of this way that I've chosen to express myself, and not really his success propelling people forward, but other people saying, you know, I think this really resonates with my hobby and my interests, instead of just being art that talks about keyboards. It literally is part of the keyboard, and it is our art as a community.
Right.
And yes, Nubbinator did write a guide. Yes.
Nubbinator. That's such a name, Nubbinator. I like that name. So, but you have not only been involved like with the artisan community, right? You have other projects, right, outside the artisan community. What would you say are those projects?
Oh wow. Well, are you talking about current projects or past projects?
Oh, past projects, not current.
Okay, so outside of artisans, I was involved in making sure that the community had access to high-level commercial manufacturing of grade 0 lubricants. I mean, I think that trying to work with Salvin so much helped him kind of get his stuff going, so that's more into the keyboard end of things. And non-keyboard related wise, I've done a couple like audio DIY projects, like phono preamps for people with vinyl records. At one point I did a USB DAC and headphone amplifier. I've done a lot of artwork, for commission artwork for people over the years, just sketches and digital things. I was heavily involved in the meetup scene, organizing and making sure that, you know, people knew what was going on, and doing a lot of the meet and greet stuff at meetups. It's been an adventure being here for so long, that's for sure.
Yeah,
I
I mean, like, how was the idea for you, like, for you to get in touch with, like, with the manufacturer to make loop, right? Like, I feel like that's like such a huge step, right, for the community. No.
I I really wasn't too sure what the impact was going to be for people
Mm-hmm.
because um, there's a couple ways that you can go about getting a smooth switch, and one of them is just to use your switch for a long time.
Right.
Eventually, it will wear in and it will feel like a lubricated switch because these are made of materials that really only get more, um, or I'm sorry, they're the surface energy of the material decreases as its lifespan goes on and it's been used longer. Um, and surface energy is just the what kind of friction coefficient it would have. That's one. So that's one way. But if you wanted to have that kind of already broken in feel
Feeling.
on a new switch, you could use a lubricant. And one of the old administrators to GeekHack was very knowledgeable, and we talked a lot about casting and chemical processes. He went by Mkawa, and he used to make the Geek Hackers lubricant, but it was rife with problems. Um, Problems that people who weren't very good at lubricating would make worse by over lubricating a switch. And that mostly had to do with lubricant separation. And the the concept of a grade zero lubricant is that it's got enough of what is called a binder in it that
Mm-hmm.
keeps the lubricious solids and the lubricious liquids
Like.
cohesive and homogeneous, even in the presence of heat or um, mechanical use of whatever your tool is. Yeah, just
Right.
physical agitation. The parts will remain homogeneous, and that's a very difficult thing to engineer. Um, when I was speaking with individuals from Miller Stevenson, we were talking about binders for mold release, and that was partially what I was doing. Was I was developing a mold release for artisans,
Mm-hmm.
that I mean any artisan in the United States can purchase from my website. But the concept there was I didn't feel like mold release was very good
Right.
out there.
Man,
It felt
200.
like, well, Man 200 is quite good at silicon to silicon release, but I do
Mm-hmm.
not think it is appropriate for polyurethane to silicon release as much as something that is more purpose
Mm-hmm.
built for that task. It's a little too um, caustic to the silicon itself. It degrades silicon rather quickly to use Man 200 all the time. Um, so we were talking, and I noticed a lot of the materials that we were using for mold release, and then for uh, that I remember
For the binders.
Mkawa was saying he was using to make his Geek Hackers lubricant. So I started asking questions about the possibility of exploring some lower viscosity than GPL grade 2, which is the standard Krytox um, grease viscosity.
Right.
And they were like, we don't know if it's going to be okay or stable, but let's make some samples, or let's give you some samples, and let's see if it works in your application. So we got that formulated to the viscosities that we wanted, and I sent some to Krellbit,
Right.
and
Mm-hmm.
Krellbit and I were talking back and forth, and he sent that around to people who were making keyboards for people who were streaming or commissioning, and he was like, just put this in and see if they notice. So there were
Try it
people who
out.
were asking for stuff like 106, like
Right.
I
Mm-hmm.
want a 106 oil, and to save the maker's time, we were like, try out this Tribosis, what would be called Tribosis 204 grade 0 and 203
Or
grade 0
really?
and 205 grade 0. And that's really what got people to saying, like, some of the makers would come back to us and they'd be like, the thick stuff was too thick, but the thinner was, right in line with the oils that I use. This feels almost identical and it's saving me a ton of time.
Mm-hmm.
How can I get more of this? And then, we went from there. It kind of snowballed. And that was really the series of events that kind of led to, I guess, getting a better solution for the community. And then it just became an issue of building up a reliable supply chain. There were complications with that I don't think are really worth talking about. But
I mean, when did you guys start releasing it? Because I think when I started in the hobby, like in 2019, there was still a bit of shortage of it. So, but right now, like everyone has in stock, right? So when did you start releasing that for the public, right? For the stores?
Well, we started making that available in 2018.
Right. Oh, yes. So 2018, that makes sense.
Yeah, and it got very popular very quickly, and there really wasn't. I mean, you'd hear the word shortage a lot in 2018, but it was more like, oh, there's a 2 or 3 week wait.
Yeah.
It wasn't awful. 2020 though was bad. And it was so terribly stressful for us that we had to make a really big decision to, move it to a much greater scale, but also step away from the project entirely. So I no longer have anything to do with the supply chain. But I mean, as you've seen, because of the steps we took to secure it as kind of like a global mainstay, like everybody is using this, we've proven to the manufacturers that this industry isn't without a demand. This isn't just some fluke thing. It just took a lot of time and effort to make that happen. But that's kind of the thing with manufacturers. When you're doing something with a product that they didn't design to fix a problem, they didn't make Krytox or Tribosis or anything. Well, I mean, technically they did make Tribosis for keyboards because it doesn't exist anywhere else for anything else. But they thought we were out of our minds. They were like, why would you need something engineered like this for keyboards? And I'm like,
trust
works.
Me,
it lasts for a long time. And this is probably the easiest way people have of doing it themselves. Right. In other forms like oils, it's kind of a pain in the butt. And then when you get the thicker greases, it just doesn't work as well. So finding that happy medium, and part of the reason why this doesn't exist in other industries is because the binder we were talking about before, it's not really suitable for high temperature. In very high temperature, in like high speed mechanics and things where you would normally find something, a lubricant this durable, it would separate.
So they can
there really isn't a purpose for it anywhere else, since a thicker grease would make a lot more sense in a machine that's moving very slowly. Anyway, in that case, the grease won't move around as much in a machine like that. And a key switch is actually a really low speed
I'm
machine.
Not that fast typer.
It's not fast. You're not generating a lot of heat. So it works really well. But to convince a manufacturing company that they're going to be enough people out there sitting there and taking apart 104 switches, a keyboard, and brushing it in place, they were like, I don't think so.
I don't think this is okay.
So I mean, we'll make it. Just give us your money and we'll make it. It took a lot of money and a lot of time to prove that it was something that they should pursue expanding their manufacturing capabilities.
All right. I feel like we always go way too deep on topics. I mean, that's okay. I love it. I love getting carried away personally, but we get very deep. um. Oh well. Ninja Pirate is asking real talk. What is the best way to actually get trivoices lucrans off your hands?
All right. So microfiber cloths are probably about the best way you have of removing it from being an issue, like keeping your hands from being as sticky and things like that. But the interesting thing about tribosis, and part of the reason why you want to wear gloves and something to keep it off your hands, is that it is a non-migrating and chemically stable material, and that just means that soap, most solvents, water is a solvent, but soap, solvents, most cleaning agents will not be able to get it to move, so you have to physically displace it, and microfibers are probably one of the best ways to do that, because there's just so many tiny microscopic fibers to help pick it up and remove it from the surface of the subject. But technically, if you get it on your hands at some deep porous level, it's there for good.
There.
It's always there. It's not going to leave, and that can be bad, as is
long term, maybe, right?
I think there's a movie called like Black River or something like that about how DuPont was dumping this stuff into a river.
Right. Yes, I saw it. Yeah, I think with Mark Ruffalo.
Yeah. It's kind of, it's not great in large quantities. It's not awful in small quantities. You're not going to be. It's not really a toxic thing, but there's other implications, because your body doesn't like things on it that aren't natural, and so it will react if it's in contact with something long enough, with enough of it, or your body will try and store it in places like in fat.
That's no good
so
either.
This gets very complicated very quickly, but the only way to actually get rid of these, and part of the reason why it's so robust is because it's fluorinated. The molecules are encapped with fluorine or fluoride, or there's an analog of fluoride, fluorine, and it's on the end of the molecular chain, and that makes it incredibly stable. It will not come apart for anything short of a pure acid or pure base, and both of those will just burn a hole right through your skin. So just stay away from that anyway.
Yeah, I mean, thanks. I mean, I'm not wearing gloves all the time, so that's a plus, right? So you touch a bit about clags and the beginning of artisans, right? Like, but what exactly made you want to do like a sculpt, right? Like, oh yeah, I want to do this design, and then actually be like, yeah, I think I can sell this. Well, is this viable to a degree, right?
I didn't do anything to sell at the beginning.
Right.
That was not the intention. I said to people, I'm going to sculpt whatever I want to sculpt, and I will show you how to sculpt anything and turn it into a keycap at the end. And if I can't figure out how to do that, at least you will have the original sculpt that I made. So all of my original keys were made out of polymer clay.
Oh, okay.
So that's all of my original keys were polymer clay. That's one of the reasons why the synth base is metal.
It's metal
because it allows you to sculpt in polymer clay, and that's a really good low toxicity way of getting into it. There's a lot of people that don't have huge living spaces. Like if you're saying, you just want to dip your toes in, you don't want to spend a lot of money. To me, that also raises red flags of like, I don't want to spend a lot of money on protection or things like that. So if you have the ability to make a polymer clay keycap, or maybe a keycap that uses, say, like a moldable epoxy, you can have a relatively low commitment to resins. You don't actually have to commit to resin at all. You can just make a sculpture and see if people like it and whatnot. And that's what I did. I made some sculptures and I taught people to cast. And what I made, people were just like, yeah, I want to buy that. And I was really surprised. So I kept doing it. And then as I was doing it, I just really wanted to improve because, like I said, I wasn't trying to do anything at all. It wasn't, it was not my best work. My early stuff was not pretty, it was not polished, and it took me a while to get my skills that were kind of at a macro level down to a micro level of detail. That took a lot of practice to do that, and I think I really started to break ground with the Lion King sculpt. um, and even then I was really just chasing the kinds of things that I felt I wanted to improve at, not necessarily what I thought would be a good marketable product. And I mean, a lot of where this turned into a full-time thing for me and like a real life investment was just after years of doing it, people were still interested in my work, and I was spending so much time on uh, being an artisan that my full-time jobs and my family life were starting to suffer. So something had to go, and I felt really attached to my artwork at that point,
Hmm.
and so I kept with it.
That's such a big decision to make, right? I cannot imagine doing that.
Yeah, it was big, but it felt pretty easy at the time. It didn't feel really easy after that, but it felt
The
easy at the
first
time.
month, great. The second one, not so much. Right. But I mean, that's good to hear. I mean, we're here, right, today. So, hey,
Heck yeah, man. What is it now? Four years? No, yeah, 4 years later, after going full time,
full
still
time,
here.
4 years. That's very cool. Um, so you mentioned that you're getting involved to doing other stuff, right? Apart from like artisans, right? To bigger projects, you said you mentioned it before the stream, right? Would you like to talk
Uh,
about something like trying to branch
well,
out your brand?
I it's not so much about brand.
Hmm.
It's more about like what I can do
Hmm.
and what my wife, who goes by Widgie Pidge, can do. We're skilled workers, and before going into, or sorry, while working with artisans, we were both very involved in other things that have
Hmm.
kind of been put on hold because of the pandemic. And I mean, currently we're trying to work out a few local contracts to do larger resin work, which is something that's not, it's not really a mystery for us. We do a ton of work with color matching resins and doing prototypes for people and molding things as big as keyboard cases. Um, it's just a matter of balancing the projects, finding the right kind of time, and I mean, any of them could be a potential direction. I don't know if anything will really replace making artisan keycaps and trying to move that forward, because that's something that we both really enjoy doing. Um, but as far as diverging from artisans, we've been doing that for years. The focusing on making a molding platform for other people was something that was, you know, not, that wasn't exactly like a selfish interest. I could have made something like this for myself
And call it a day.
and not shared it with anyone
Yeah.
else. We developed colorants in the last couple of years, so we sell colors. We developed a mold release with Miller Stevenson. You know, like they did a lot of the driving, but we kind of determined what its performance properties were going to be like. We told them, you know, this isn't working for us. This is working for us. We went through probably 5 or 6 iterations of material before it ever became exactly what we felt would work properly for molds. And we've been working at making that a, you know, some publicly available tools for people. But before the pandemic, I was doing classes in my local area and teaching people how to do things. So we generally keep pretty busy. It's not all about the artisans, but I do spend a lot of time on artisans. I do really
That's
like
so
it.
cool.
Yeah.
That's so cool to hear. I just gotta say that the white, the basic white, it's pretty good. I because I had some other pigment, other white pigment that they never like mix well enough, and they after they're creating it, it's a mess. So the weight, it's so good.
I'm so glad you like it. That
Yeah,
was
it's
one of
pretty
those
good.
things that we started making the
Hmm.
colors trying to solve the white problem,
It's so bad.
because if you look at a lot of early artisans, there's not a lot of white
White.
combination colors
Hmm.
used. They're usually really pure, punchy, bright colors or things
Right.
mixed with dark stuff, but not so much pastels or colors that would require some amount of white in them to
Hmm.
solve. And a lot of the times people solve that problem by using a white curing resin. They would
Mm,
color a white curing resin, and it would brighten and whiten as you use that white curing resin.
right. That makes sense.
But the problem is that resin yellows over time.
Oof.
So
Oh no.
uh, you get that brighten and whiten and opacity and everything, but then
It gets
the
shot.
color is not very stable.
Right.
Um, so yeah, just a lot of things to fix
Hmm.
that we noticed were problems, and we kind of set out to do it. I feel like we've done a pretty good job so far.
Yeah, I really like it. It's very thick. It's super thick. Most like pigment that I have, they're very like not thick at all. But that white's very thick. I don't know. I had to say it. Nice word.
It's thick artisan blood.
Yeah, I
That's
mean, yeah,
what it
that's
is.
why. Maybe that's why. um. So now talking about a bit more of the hobby, like, do you try to keep up with current group buys like sets, keyboards, switches?
Not so much switches, but I've kept up with some keyboards.
Hmm.
I got into a couple group buys last year, and I have them sitting right next to me,
Oh, oh.
and I haven't had a moment of time to work on them. So I took that as a sign that I shouldn't be involved in any other group buys
Oh
until
no.
I figure out um, a lot more about what direction we're
So,
going in,
mhm.
and how our projects are going to proceed. Um, but I keep an eye on what other people are excited about, because it's really nice to be able to talk with people about their
Right.
interests.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like, for
Their
example,
opinions.
yeah, I I still think that there's a lot of crossover in just basic switch types. So even if people are talking
Franken
about new
switches, right?
switches, yeah, well, I mean in the sense where, like, a clicky is a clicky, a tactile is a tactile, a linear is a
Is a
linear,
linear. Okay.
is a linear is a linear. You can
Who would
have all
have
kinds
thought?
of variations, but you got to first start with that whole, like, okay, so is it a clicky? Is it a tactile? Is it a linear? Is it a top throw
Right.
switch? Is the actuation somewhere in the middle? Like,
Right.
give me some of those basic details before we start getting into, like, whether or not it's got, you know,
PC top, some weird mixtures of plastic.
yeah, or God, there's some new switch that has the entire inside of it is
Mhm.
coated with dampening silicone.
Oh, right. Yeah, there's one
Yeah.
with metal covering too. It's I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, so there's all kinds of exciting things happening all the time, and I think people who are more interested in that are probably the
Hmm.
people who are making keyboards for people,
Hmm.
because they have something new to talk about, they have something new to tell people who are following them, something new to show on their build streams, and those
Content.
kinds of details show just how passionate they are about what they're doing. You know,
Hmm.
um, that's so I tend to stay away from switches, but I do like some of the keyboards that I'm seeing. There's a point every so many years where there's a pretty big innovation, and I think the last big innovation in customs was gaskets. To be, if I'm being quite honest, we were messing around with gaskets all the way back in like 2015, using dampening materials to help suspend the plate in place. And it was more just like, wow, this is really complicated, but the manufacturing there is now for people to have custom cut foam and rubber
Right.
and all kinds of other material. And that really changed the feel of how people approach the the overall tactility of the board other than the switches.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you could use the switches, but on a really stiff board, they all end up having that same stiff
feel.
bottom out.
Right.
And once you change how the bottom out feels, it almost feels as though the board itself has a certain kind of movement to it.
Right.
And that can be very pleasant to some people.
Mm-hmm.
But that kind of innovation it only comes around every so many years. And
Right.
within that time, you're going to have a lot of
Iterations.
a lot of iterations, a lot of group buys that are doing similar things
Mm-hmm.
under different names with maybe slightly different aesthetics. So I guess if I could just use this as a little bit of a time to advise anybody out there who may be, stressing about joining the right group buy, definitely join a couple for your interest, because once you build that first keyboard, you're going to learn a lot of stuff, and you're going to want to build another one. And you're not going to want to try to find one of those kits again.
Right.
And it's also not a good idea to put all of your eggs into one group buy basket. Group buys can fail. They have failed in the past spectacularly. So if you go and you find a couple things that interest you and say, I wouldn't mind building one of these and one of these and one of these, and having those for a while, I think people are going to be really satisfied with that. That's what I've done, and it's worked really well for me all the way back in like 2012. So I've got some years doing it, and if that advice can help anybody, I hope it does.
Can you tell us what keyboards are unbuilt right there?
Yeah, it's the it's the JTK collab with that company that does like the breakout keyboard cases, the things that come on sprues and you assemble them, right? They're made of like ABS.
Oh, like the box? I think it's called the box or something like that.
It might be. I didn't pay enough attention to it, but let me I'll just get it real.
Ooh. Life unboxing. Oh god. Oh no. The can. Okay. Some keycaps.
It's all in parts. I've got a plate here. I've got I don't remember what these are, but essentially it's a whole bunch of the Tanwen Mars project things, and I felt like the whole kit and assembly were really fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like 60%. I love ortholinears, but there aren't very many ortholinears that I enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
And this is PCBs in here. Yeah. So these are GH60 PCBs.
Oh boy. It's
that are in here. There's a plate and these other pieces. It's just all in parts right now in a box, and
They're just waiting. They're just waiting.
yeah, I'm just waiting to have the time to work on it. Um, I've had my switches since 2018, so I'm good.
In your case, the group buys. You don't wait for the group buys. They wait for you. Basically.
I mean, it's kind of funny. Like at this point, I have enough keyboards that I'll definitely be happy with, and I think anybody can find a really nice keyboard that doesn't have to be custom. They really don't have to
You
find.
don't have to.
Yeah,
Right.
it's
like
just super nice.
you can use a membrane keyboard and be happy. You don't need.
Yeah.
But yeah. By the way, I didn't notice the Popsy behind you. Looks pretty cool. He's so cool. I love the little hand. That's my favorite detail.
Yeah, it's really fun. We engineered it so if you poke the hand, it depresses the key.
Oh, really?
So if you
That's
give him a little
cool.
high five, then
Oh,
he'll
so
work.
cute.
It'll actuate the switch.
That's so cute. Oh well. What about key sets?
That was actually the last key set that I was involved in, was the Tianwen key set. I'm color matching Bingzu right now. I'm excited for the Dolch release that's coming up. That Lightning keyboards spearheading. Yeah. So I mean, I love Dolch. I have 4 sets of Dolch original. Like
really?
Yeah.
I've really got Dolch.
Well, I mean, okay, so again, this is kind of what was happening with the communities at the time. Was if you didn't like get that good deal
right
before, like it wasn't a good deal, what would happen is somebody would flip it, and then if your friends wanted that deal, they couldn't get it. And I kind of think in a really disturbed way that a lot of people in the community could be a friend or a decent acquaintance. So I keep a lot of stuff just to be like, oh, you don't have a key set, and you've been really nice to talk to. Here, like have it at cost. It didn't cost me a lot. I don't want it to cost you a lot. I bought it in case somebody in the community who wanted to have a nice keyboard could do that. And that used to be something that a lot of people did a lot more freely. It's not so common much anymore that people will take goodwill and keep it. They usually take the goodwill and flip it, which is a little disappointing. But yeah, it's given me, well, that kind of thinking got me a lot of key sets. So I have like a few Ski Data originals, a few Dolch. I've got some BSP sets. I've got more keycap sets than I do keyboards in large capacity. And that's just because I've been involved in just about every starting group buy that the community had for GMK, to try and get GMK to recognize that the community was serious about doing that. So if people weren't really participating, I don't think it really
I mean, most
been available.
The oldest sets didn't have a lot of they didn't sell a lot of them, right? Like Olivia's barely got to Emokyo, right? And it's one of the most famous set these days, right? So that tells a lot of how the hobby has grown over the years, right? I mean, I think COVID really helped a lot, right?
Being stuck inside and having like the keyboard is your portal to communication other than the webcam. I don't know about you, but this is amazing. But I don't think I could pop into a Zoom with any old stranger in the community for hours a day. It's a lot easier for me to have that buffer of a chat room
Mhm.
kind of environment to type things out or to watch what people are saying. And depending on how scuffed the conversation is, you can be like, I'm gonna keep my distance, maybe look in a
I'm
different
good.
chat. Or maybe, oh, I really like this emoji chain that we've got going on. Everybody's posting funny gifs. Let's shit post, guys. Let's do this.
Yes.
Um,
Pepe.
so yeah, and you just, like I said earlier, when
Mhm.
you're on the computer that much, you want something that is comfortable. You want something that's nice to use. And anybody who talks about a comfortable typing experience is talking about a mechanical keyboard, right?
Mhm. Yeah. I asked you about Gisets because I wanted to do an ad basically because my first set it's live right now. It's on GroupBuy, so please guys check it out.
Check out his set, guys. He's so
Yes,
nice.
there's a
He's
link,
trying
guys.
real hard.
I will show it on screen, but I didn't set up the other screen, guys. I'm sorry, I can't show it up on screen. Just check the link, guys. I swear. Anyways,
I do collabs with just to I see it's Zatina and Almond Dog ask questions. Do you mind if I address
yeah,
those?
yeah, of course.
So the question, do you do collabs or only for the set of some friends? I am open to collaborating with anybody, but we really have to have a good rapport and communication because I take collaborations very seriously. Um, any kind of lapse in communication and or length of time where we're not talking with each other like every day about moving the project forward and having some kind of progress, I get disinterested really quickly.
Really.
Um,
Oh,
because that's how I handle my own projects. And this kind of
they're
leads
very
into the second one.
right.
Binge, are you super diligent with your sculpting, or do you sculpt whenever the stars align for you, or do you super plan out ideas and turn them into projects? It's like it's always going on up here. That's that's really what's happening. And sometimes that energy that is going into sculpting turns into ideas for casting and vice versa. So I just have to remain working and
Mm-hmm.
involved in it, and it progresses. Um, Earlier this year, I had an issue where I broke my dominant hand.
Oof.
So sculpting and a lot of physical labor has been really hard. I am not anywhere near as strong as I used to be, and that's been a problem. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm working through it, and it's been a little difficult to manage that. But I don't think it's really affected my diligence at all,
Mm-hmm.
or my workflow. It's just made it so I've had to take some more breaks and learn a couple new ways of approaching the same problem that I would usually just you know
Right.
use
Mm-hmm.
my own dexterity to solve. I'm kind of building myself little props and things to rest my hand against to get certain angles that are quite difficult now. Um,
Sorry to
I
hear that.
lost some of that dexterity.
I was about to ask you something. Oh yeah, yeah. Um, now that I know about your problem with your hand, but before that, would you say that you like it sculpting more than casting, or casting more than sculpting, personally? Right.
Well, that's actually really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I mean, they're
they
very
are
different things.
they are very different,
Yeah.
and that's the real tricky part, because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes or at least my headspace approaching that avenue of thought, you know, approaching those ideas. I'm approaching a sculpt. How am I thinking? I'm approaching a cast. How am I thinking? And they can be so very different. It's hard to transition from one to another easily. If I've been sculpting a lot, sometimes I feel really rusty when I get back into casting, and vice versa. So if I had a choice, I'd want to be sculpting more. But to have that kind of sculpting option available to me, I also want to have a certain kind of collaboration with whomever is casting,
Mhm.
because I get some of my greatest insight into sculpting by casting the pieces that I'm working on. Um, I wouldn't have learned that I might be able to sculpt something a certain way if I hadn't noticed the resin behaving a certain way.
Right, or the silicone, right? Like the mold and not behaving the way
Mm-hmm.
that you expected
Yep.
it.
Yep.
Yeah, I personally love sculpting more than anything. I feel like casting it's a bit tedious sometimes, and then you miss one shot or you didn't put it properly, and you're like, oh, 4 hours of work is gone, you know. So I feel like a bit like it's daunting, you know.
It is daunting. There's a lot of time that you can misplace, right?
Yeah, what just there's a little dot, and then you're like, oh well, start again, boys. I'm like, yeah, day's over.
Maybe tomorrow.
Maybe tomorrow. Um,
Yeah, and enough of that. And a whole week goes by, and what have
yeah,
you
yeah.
done? Um, there's the question: how do you personally decide to retire Sculpt? Generally, I think about when Sculpt is doing its absolute best, and then I retire it to make everybody angry at me. I
You're
don't know when I retire a Sculpt. Actually, it's more of like if it feels right, then it's time for it to stop. Um, Generally, there's a lot of frustration with the casting process
mhm.
that kind of
Yeah, I mean, you want to
that goes
optimize,
into that.
right? In a way, right?
If you're, since this is my job,
Mm-hmm.
if it's not optimized, then I'm building up a lot of stress about something that could be better. I
Mm-hmm.
could be doing it better. I need to rethink this. If I want to go forward with this character, I really have to, you know, figure this out. Um, and that's really it. Like, if something isn't working and I'm casting it over and over again and I'm getting more and more frustrated, then that's bad. And then there are other things like I retired the auto file because my whole inspiration of making the auto file was that a friend of mine had passed away rather suddenly. He was my age, so that hit really close. We were coworkers. We worked in the same office for like 3 years. Sat next to the guy every day, and he went on vacation and never got to go on vacation because he died suddenly while he was packing his bags. And I made the auto file in a time of grief, and after it being successful and it being like a really positive project, and I wasn't really running into any issues casting it. It had its challenges, but it was a good sculpt and everything. I just rationalized, like, this is kind of weird that I'm selling my
So
friend's
you're
death
brave, right?
over and my grief over and over and over again. And I got really upset when I would do like a special order and I saw it get flipped, and that's not really healthy or like mentally. So that wasn't a good thing to keep going and pursuing. Um, Sometimes I'm sure you know this, if a master or a mold breaks that you can't reproduce, you can't keep going with
Right.
that sculpt.
Mm-hmm.
And that's happened a few times with things like the hunger key. Was everything died. I was working on a commission for a friend,
Mm-hmm.
um, with the hunger key in mind, and everything broke. The molds broke first, and then I tried to remake the molds, and the masters, the originals, sculpts for that key all broke. So that was it. I couldn't make anymore. That was it.
I would. That's. I don't know how we feel about that. Like, because like for example, I have one sculpt that's basically like hair, and the clay sculpt, because the silicone got like really deep into the hair, right? So it's, when I tried to pull it out, it totally destroyed the sculpt itself. So I only have one master right now, like one silicone mold basically. But if it's gone, then oh man, I feel like so bad, because like you put so many hours into sculpting one thing, right? And then you know, you fucked up one time and they're like, yo, I guess I will die.
But that is exactly why it is something that is expensive. Like,
Yeah.
to reproduce these things is an incredibly careful process. And kind of
Mhm.
going into this, how do you feel about the artisan hobby and at the moment in total, like talking about rising prices, more and more new makers, 3D printing. I mean, touching on the 3D printing thing, you have a lot less of an issue, recovering from
Right.
a bad
Mhm.
molding accident if you're using 3D printed stuff. But rightfully, you shouldn't be charging as much. Those are my opinions on it, because like, if you're talking about like an oil painting versus a digital painting, if you're commissioning an oil paint, that's expensive. That's really expensive. And there's a reason for that, because you're paying for somebody's time and energy, and the fact that at any point along the way, if they mess up or something gets damaged, it's
Yeah.
done. That's it. But if somebody can just be like, "Oh, let me print you out another one," it's like, let's be honest here. The value in that is more of a novelty and less of um, a labor of love, to be a little unfair. And I'll admit that's kind of being a little unfair and a little gatekeepy, but that's also kind of how I feel about the impermanence of certain things, and how, um, kind of like my friend, he was not there forever in my life to hang out with and play video games and everything like that. It's something to be cherished, and a lot of these handmade pieces, there's going to be a point where, say we're talking about, you know Liam and his
Yeah.
bongos. If he ever sustains an injury like I have, he may not be able to resin
Yeah.
right as well as he does right now. He's a young guy. Um, he's got great control, but things can happen and that can disappear. So you're kind of investing in the person's, like, efforts that they're putting forth to showcase their dexterity and their skill at a certain point in their lifetime. And it's all very personal stuff. It's visceral, it's human. um that's I guess that's how I feel about 3D printing. As far as more artisans getting involved, I think that's awesome. This is the keyboard community's, like, I like to think of it as the art form. There is art in keyboards.
Mhm.
There's design art, like there's art and design and aesthetics, and um, like desk mats, and there are even desk figurines or things that could all be related to the keyboard community. But if you look back in the history of how people were expressing themselves, aside from, picking a switch and picking a kind of already existing set, or trying to make a key set happen in a group buy, one of the first ways that people showed their interest in marrying some kind of analog art form with this bit of technology was the artisan keycap. Um, I think that is significant. I think it should be something that young people get into, new people should get into, if they have the discipline and drive and they take it seriously enough, because it is a commitment both to their health and to a certain kind of like knowledge about how they need to conduct themselves using these tools. Um, the rising prices, I don't know too much about. My prices haven't changed too much, um, over the past 2 years.
I mean, not
I
not your personal level. What about like the other like new makers, right? Like, what do you think would be like a fair price for a new maker, a new sculpt, right?
I still think if you're brand new and you're not releasing like
Mhm.
hot fire like art key or um I mean you kind of have to compete with where your skill level is and not just sell yourself because that's the market value for an item for that. Like a lot of people had to spend years building up that value. I sold keycap. My early keycaps were $13 a piece. I know how much making keycaps in your spare
13.
time.
Ooh.
Yeah, I know how much that costs. Those prices have not changed much. If somebody values their hobby time, like learning something at like a $50 a cap rate, they've got to be putting a lot more into it than I was, feeling around in the dark trying to get my bearings, especially when so many of these problems have already been solved and there's publicly available solutions. It's not like people are breaking their necks trying to figure out how this stuff works right now.
Yes.
Um, there's quite a lot of public information, public tools, better materials. Um, so that doesn't really mean a new person's work is expensive. It really doesn't when there's so many people and existing artisans that can make stuff, but that does not mean that you shouldn't seek your value. Like don't take me being critical of like starting artisans saying no starting artisan should make this kind of money. That doesn't make sense. If you've
Right.
got the talent and you've got the skill, you will make that money. People will tell you you are not charging enough for this. But I'll go out on a limb here and say something that is not okay to normally say about anybody or anything. Please do not take my rudeness as like an example of how to set yourself. But Goth Keys should never have been charging as much as he did. If we're gonna call out a specific, I mean, this is some spicy stuff. We're
I
gonna
see.
call out a specific maker and say this is something that a buyer of keycaps should look out for, is somebody who is literally taking things that anyone else could be doing, whether it's like an upside down cross or a 3D printed thing or like ink, like epoxy ink drop
Mhm.
effects, like these things that you see moms on YouTube teaching other moms how to do to make like coasters.
Coasters, yeah.
They're telling you how to do this in a YouTube video because it's easy, not because it's like next level art or it's actually going to blow your mind. It's like it's because it's easy and repeatable and they sell their stuff for like $10. Putting it in a keycap does not make it instantly
Right.
30 or 40 or $50. There's really not that much
And
there.
now car doesn't make it that expensive.
Yeah, but like artisan keycaps could very easily still be in the. I think accounting for inflation, somebody starting out making decent work, good colors. There's very few blemishes. Like 25 to $40 would be like a good range for something basic that you could find somewhere else. I think that's. I don't know. How do you think that evaluation is
I think that's
given
fair.
the
I mean, like, I feel like, for example, like someone who started like collecting artisans in 2019, right? Um, I have seen a bit of rise in pricing, like even new makers, like with like a very basic sculpt with very basic shots, and they're charging like 65. I'm like it hurts. Like, and I'm like, well, if people are buying it, right? And then I'm like, well, if people buy it, then what can I do about it, right? People just, they're voting with their
oh
wallet.
yeah,
So,
you can't speak for others. It's just
right,
kind
right.
of like this idea, if you want to actually take this as advice from an old
Hmm.
person who really has very little self-control when I'm speaking my mind, like that's just me. um if I were to give like a younger me, like another binge out there or bingeette or whatever, they binge, egg binge, whatever,
Which,
a young creative out there trying to make a name for themselves is like integrate yourself in the community in a positive way. Build positive feedback loops. You don't have to take, gobs of money while you can get it, because that won't create a healthier economy in this space. You like giving a little bit of yourself is not a bad thing. You're not undervaluing yourself. You can always ask for more if it makes sense to you. If it's really preventing you from pursuing your happiness going forward with the craft itself, then yeah, definitely charge more, especially if people are willing to support you. It just becomes a little complicated when it feeds into something that might be a lot like a bubble. And when people pursue that top end price more and more and more, and see people like who are say getting that $65 at the time, they have to then start charging more. They have to,
yeah,
because
older makers,
if they
right?
don't, then they can't say they can't say that they value their own skill
Mm-hmm.
as an experienced maker.
Mm-hmm.
So if everything pushes up, eventually it gets to a breaking point where the real economy here are the buyers. They're the ones building this economy. Once a buyer gets fatigued, they're liable to sell off their whole collection or do something like burn all their stuff.
God.
And you see all that value in people's time and efforts, like pursuing this craft and being kind of like ambassadors of this art
Mm-hmm.
form, that just goes up in smoke right there. Um, it doesn't create a very positive environment. So that's my thoughts on it. Like you
Right.
want to give in order to build up, I guess a better faith in what this art form has. Build up that goodwill, um, and you can ask for goodwill back, especially if getting more goodwill gives you more tools to give more in this space. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of the goodwill that went towards HungerWorkStudio, and even in the times where we've made mistakes, I've put it right back into projects that are meant to help others either push their potential a little bit further or have better tools in order to, um, you know, make this art form more valuable as
Right.
a whole. That's very much how I view um, my approach towards artisans. As
Mm-hmm.
far as, again, back to the current state of things, it kind of feels like the same state maybe like 2 years ago, just on a larger scale. Um, I don't, again, I don't really know exactly because I'm a little insulated. When I started, I was saying I don't know if my prices have changed much, and I've kind of kept my head out of that because I already charge a lot for what I consider to be a lot of money, a good bit of money for things like the Popsy. And I recently tried to do a very ambitious key called the Hidden Hunger, and this is another like
Yeah. I've seen it.
multi-mold key, and I tried to make it a $75 key, which is pretty low because that's what Keyforge was charging in 2017 for his shishis and orochis, and those were single mold, usually 1 to 2 color keys, and I was very critical of that. But this is multi-mold, and it takes just as long as making a Popsy. But I didn't want to make this too expensive because it looks like a blank. Like
Yeah.
you can't really get away from that. Functional, like
It
visibly,
functions like a blank,
yeah,
basically.
it functions like a blank, but visibly you can only ever see one of two
Yeah.
parts of the sculpt at any given time. So, I really care about what kind of value I'm giving to other people. If this ends up becoming popular and people want it to an extent where I'd have to ask for more money in order to do it more regularly, I'd have to ask for more. But I don't think I've gotten to that point. I've already increased the price of that um, as high as I feel comfortable. And I'm actually working on something with another artist, hopefully soon. I can't say more right now, but I can talk more about that. That should be like a lower price point. But it's a single mold key, so I feel more comfortable doing that.
That's fair.
My focus has just been multi-mold, and that's put a barrier between me and that entry level range that I'd very much like to be a part of again. Were you familiar with singles nights that we did last year?
I'm not. I don't remember, honestly. Right now, I don't remember. If you have,
I had to put it on hiatus because I broke my hand and molds failed and things like that. But essentially, every Friday night I would put single shot Earl escapes on the website for $20 a piece.
Usually, yeah, $20.
So there's somebody who's been casting last year. That would have been 6 years of experience. Somebody with 6 years of experience who's released keycaps that have auctioned for well over $4,000. Like, for one, I've made money with keys, people, and I would spend part of my week to make like about 20 or so keys that were all $20 a piece. So yeah, that's my pricing. So newbies.
Oh well.
Yeah, I carried on a little bit there. Sorry, man.
Nah, man, it's okay. So we talk about a bit, doing collabs with sets, right? What about? I know you have collabed with other makers like Sculpt, right? Like Death Caps, EFT. Like what was the process, or how the idea began of trying to work together, right?
I found my most successful collaborations have always been in person, and I like to set pretty rigorous deadlines. Like, we're going to start this and we're going to work every day for a week, and at the end of the week we just stop what we're doing, and that's the collaboration. So because I like to spend forever on projects personally, if I can put more time and energy into it, I truly believe it will end up being a better thing at the end. That's not really a healthy way of going about it.
Oh god.
But when you're working with somebody else, that can be multiplied. Like, two people both wanting it to be the absolute best thing that they do. Having that strict like deadline kind of mentality can really help. And that's how I approach it. I set firm deadlines, and I try to do any kind of collaboration in person when at all possible. It's really important for me.
That's a fair requirement, I will say so. Yeah, let me check. Give a second. Did the chat have any other questions for you? Let's see. Sorry guys. Oh, well, in the topic of like 3D stuff, right? And what do you think of Rama artisans? How do you see them?
Are they artisans? Like Rama the designer?
No, the metals artisans, the metal caps.
Yeah, like the guy who does Rama keyboards.
Yeah.
I mean, they're novelties. I've always said if it's not made by a person's hand, it's a novelty, in my opinion, and that can really offend some people, and I'm sorry if I have offended you. I think there's a difference between novelties and artisans, because novelties can be manufactured without the inclusion of a person when it's being like when most of it is being made, the person is not actively adjusting or manipulating or using their dexterity to create the finished piece. And there's this gray area of what makes an artisan or what does not make an artisan. But I think the more and more it gets to something that can be mass produced with very little knowledge about what it takes to make that thing by your hands, it becomes more of a novelty. The word artisan is very good for selling things, but like I have some Salvin stuff that he milled, but then he cast inside his milled keycaps. And I felt like those were actually kind of artisan pieces because he still had to use molds that he made with his hands. He had these pieces, and that's kind of like if you look at the new artisan website that Armendis made. I don't know if you can link that here for these guys if they don't have it.
Give me a second, I have it.
But there's kind of like a what kind of artisan is it wheel, because it is really more like a spectrum. There's different ways that people have come up with how to make an artisan expression.
This is the one.
One of my favorite makers, Charm Caps, makes all of their keys out of polymer clay. So every single one is hand sculpted. That is, like, in my opinion, to the nth degree, the example of what it is to make art. And then there are even sculpts that aren't entirely sculpted by hand. Like, I have found things like the hindsight here. The nut shape right here, this is the end of a tire plug from our car. So I looked at that shape one day, and the whole concept for this key crystallized in my head. It all solidified, and I was like, oh my god, I gotta make this, like, this butt plug keycap thing right here, because this is hilarious. And the shape was just so fun to think about. So I found that shape and I incorporated it into a sculpt. So that isn't entirely driven by hand, but I found that thing. And with Salvin, he built all the 3D files. I know that he built most of the machine that he used to make those pieces. He didn't hire anybody to do that. So then he milled those parts. He handmade the molds that the metal pieces would go into, and then he hand cast everything into the molds. So
that'll work.
Knowing what a person has to do to make that piece, it's not easy for anybody to go and make an early Salvin artisan. Like, these days, there's like laser engraving, and there's kind of some other artisan processes like the finishing that goes onto those. That's actually really tricky. And so it's important to know what kind of work goes into the piece if somebody's going to claim, oh man, this is an artisan project. Like, what is artisan about it? Could you tell me more about your process? I think that's an important thing to ask if you want to be a little critical or figure out if the word artisan is just being used as a buzzword. I hope that kind of makes a cohesive image of what my stance or perspective is on it.
Yeah, makes sense. What do you think, like, will you ever give, like, 3D sculpting a go? Like, will you be interested in learning, or have sculpt? Yeah,
I am kind of working on something.
A small leak.
I've been working. I mean, I've been working on something. It's not necessarily so much sculpted, but it is very much 3D. And when I do get to releasing it, and I don't know when that's going to be because it's challenging for me. I'm going to call it a novelty.
Oh boy.
So.
Oh boy. Here we go.
There's my take on it. Like,
oh boy,
it is not going to be called an artisan. It is going to be a novelty. And man, I can't wait. I want to time travel to when I've completed it And
2 years. Nah, you like.
it could be. It
Oh
could be.
God.
It's really hard to figure out some of the stuff that I want to accomplish with this project. But I definitely want it to be something that somebody couldn't really make with their hands very easily. You know,
Mhm.
something that really requires that precision and machinery and kind of like computational exactness, the perfect symmetry, all of that stuff that, you know, kind of exemplifies what it means to be at the pinnacle of the techniques of manufacturing available to us. I really want it to be the kind of antithesis of an artisan, but still be considered a form of art. I think that novelties can be a form of art in the community, and people shouldn't
I
be afraid of the
agree.
term.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think because many people do consider them art, that's why they can go for so high pricing, right? Like things like gaff or even your gaffs, right? So I can totally see them as art. I think many people do see them as art, right? Um, but what about, have you considered doing a mix between hand sculpting and 3D printing? Let's say like something like your hand couldn't sculpt, right? Like for example, I made this little guy. My camera sucks, so you see those glasses. I got them
Yeah.
3D printed. So my friend helped me do the glasses because I couldn't like hand sculpt it. So the easiest way to
But I
like
can
fix
hand
it.
sculpt that.
I know, but I sucked. But I suck. Come on.
I right,
I,
and
I
but that's
couldn't, right? But so it was like
I
so.
understand that. Yeah.
Yeah. So would you consider doing something like that, right?
It really depends. I would have to have something that I literally couldn't do myself. And I kind of like the idea of found objects a little bit more than purpose building an object. The whole, you know, the nut shape in the
Mhm.
hindsight, that was really like personally very exciting. Um, I remember one time I saw a structure in one of Ritual Master's keycaps, and I asked if it was a Lego piece because it looked so similar to. Um, I don't know if you've ever seen that flexible tubing that
Mm,
like old Lego sets had.
no,
Um,
probably
a
not.
lot of um, the space sets, like the first released monorail that
Mhm.
Legos had these. They were one pip
Ah.
connector pieces with a thin, flexible hose. And so the hose was knurled like a piece of piping that would come off of a drain pipe. You know what I'm talking about?
Okay, kind of.
Like that kind of flexible ducting
Mm-hmm.
kind of
Okay.
stuff. And it looked kind of like that. And I was like, oh my gosh, this looks so similar to this piece. I wonder if he incorporated one of those into his sculpt, or maybe a guitar wire, because it just had this very uniform. It turns out the guy did it entirely with a rake tool and a snake that he, you know, rolled in his hand, like
Right.
anybody would do. They'd roll a snake in his hand, and then he
And
took
then
the
it's
rake and he sat
Mhm.
there and really meticulous made sure that all of the rake
Man, that's such a pain.
things yeah, like that kind of blew my mind with how meticulous he was willing to be to sculpt that. But I like looking at things and going, you know, could this fit in a key? What would it kind of look like? What kind of purpose could it solve? So I would have really no issues. I think it would be quite exciting to use something like a piece of metal and bend it and then sculpt, like put sculpting
Around it.
material around it and use things as part of the sculpt. I don't know if 3D printing would be my go-to,
Mm-hmm.
because it takes like less of the talents and tools and things that I've developed to make that part, and it's more kind of like in this ethereal space. I could almost have it look like whatever I want, as long as
I
the printer.
mean,
There are limitations. There
of
are
course.
limitations. I understand that, but you can get like there was a friend of mine who's into making very small things, like on the integrated circuit level, was showing me what one of their machines in their fab could build on a micron scale, and it was a fully architect building
Mhm.
on that smaller than a hair. It had windows and every little detail, and you could see it on an electron microscope. Like, the technology exists to make very, very tiny detailed things. I've just spent so much of my time learning um, how to make stuff with my own hands that I don't really feel the need for too many kind of aids. And if there was an aid, I think I want it to be something more basic. I'd want the focal pieces to be things that I've sculpted with my hands. Um, but that's really personal. I don't expect everybody to want to do that, and I think there
I'm
is a
sorry then. Nah,
degree
just kidding.
of hand. Well, you had to hand finish your piece, right?
Yeah, like every that's the only thing that's 3D printed. The rest I did it by hand, basically. This is the model classes, and this is like the skull, basically. So I did that by hand. I just couldn't do this.
And that's perfectly fair. If you wanted to learn how to do that, I hope you could sit down one day and go, how would I approach this problem as a sculptor
Mhm.
to get things to look the way I want them to look? And also not to criticize yourself too much about it not looking as it appears in your head, because that's the thing
Symmetry
that
kills
turns
me.
that that's one of those things that turns young people away from things like drawing or
Mhm.
improving on their handwriting, because it's not. And I'm not just saying this because you are younger than me. I remember being there. I remember doing that myself. I wanted to make art that looked just like comic book characters growing up. Like exactly like the characters in the comic book. And I got so frustrated when all the books that were out there telling you how to draw comic books were like, just trace everything. Everything that you see, just trace it all the time. And really that wasn't the solution that worked for me. It wasn't about tracing. It was about just practicing and getting more and more comfortable trying to solve that problem and understanding the problem of what two-dimensional depth was. How do you stabilize your lines, building up that hand strength and dexterity? There's only so much that you can do to push that forward, and it definitely doesn't come from. You can get a lot of good information and perspective from books, don't get me wrong, but there's not ever going to be a quick product you can buy to make that happen for you. Um, it's a little bit why I get a little critical of some 3D work that I see, because there's elements that I've seen in um, ready-made 3D objects that are open source
Mhm.
that I'm like, I've seen that object.
Oh god, I
I've
get
seen
that.
that object,
I
and
get that.
it's
but
just being manipulated. Like 90% of that work was already done for you. I've
but I feel
never
like
been able to.
there's the new makers like I feel like Captomaniac and Key Cravings. Like their sculpts, I really like them, and you can see the work behind them. So it's a bit biased, right? But I think what they do, like it's really nice what they do. I personally love their work, and I can see the effort behind it, right? Because I get it. I don't want to say I hate when people just go to Thingiverse and then just put it the object like in top of the keycap and like, oh, look guys, I have an artisan. You wanna buy it? I just print it out. I hate those things as
Yeah.
well, right?
No, and I've gotten over a lot of my misgivings about
Hmm.
certain sculptors, and really they do show their labor. I do think it's a little much that they have such control over every little aspect, whereas like I would never have that amount of control over the symmetry or the thickness of something. Like you can just make something expand, and oh,
Yes.
there's more volume there, just magically. Like that does not happen without a great deal of consideration when you're doing something by hand. Um, and like I said before, I think that there is kind of like a quick valuation thing that you have to do, because you have to think about how scalable something is, and 3D printing is definitely scalable. Um, making masters and casting can be scalable. It just generally takes a lot more work and expertise. But that's not to say that 3D sculptors can't make art or can't make artisans. It's more of this spectrum that a lot of people, I think, are still learning about, and that even 3D artists will get to a point where they start being a little disappointed in their peers who are taking too many shortcuts. You know, like you just mentioned a couple makers who are doing what you think is really great work, and you see the talent and the dedication that they're putting into it, and that all means something to you. And that's important because that builds that connection with the audience. That's the lifeblood of a lot of art forms. But then there's going to be somebody out there who, I think I saw something today where there's like a word, there's an AI that you can feed words and it will just create kind of artwork based on what images it can find on the internet. If there ever gets to be some sort of like AI driven assistant to sculpting, you know, that's gonna make some people be like, oh, I can't believe you're doing this, and why would you charge as much when you've got this thing smoothing out things, or making more Fibonacci sequence, you know, patterns on your whatever to, and there's all kinds of ways at which automation can kind of upset people or feel like you're separating the human experience from the industrial experience. But as long as people know what's happening and what a person did and didn't do, and you know, you kind of get this idea that all this started because we were celebrating the work that a person did. Like, they put a lot of effort into thinking, I'm going to reinvent what the space of a keycap to be a canvas for sculpting, for sculpture, right. Not just a legend, not just a double shot. This is going to be a canvas for sculpting. That it's really important to kind of have those roots in place and not lose it, just so there's some connection to the history. Not necessarily because that you know, that kind of purity needs to be maintained or anything like that. It's just it's terribly human what happened and how it grew. And I think that's important to recognize, at least for a time, before we all get bored of physical things in general and evolve to a higher plane and fly away on spaceships like that. I'm not going to hinder that progress because that sounds dope. But do you want to? I think people have been asking some questions while I've been rambling.
So I think Joey Ferreira says that he's late. If he has already discussed this, but could you touch on how to make Maker's Mark with the synth?
Yeah, you put a design on that and mold it. Easy peasy. There's really not much to it. If you have a mold, you can
just
work
do
with
it
later.
easy.
Yeah, just do it easy. Without going into too much detail, so here's a synth. It's a piece of metal. If you wanted to, you could get a metal scribe, which is a kind of etching tool. It's a small burr thing, and people would use it back in the 80s or whenever to scrawl their name on their tools. You could get something like that and just make a mark right here. You could find something that works with the chemicals that you're using, you know, and doesn't completely bond with it, but you put it on here, and then you would get a negative relief of a maker's mark. There's all kinds of ways that you could approach building a maker's mark into a synth. The thing that you're going to have to do is realize that it's all a process of molding. When I was talking earlier, and since you weren't here, I went at great length the importance of learning the ins and outs of two-part molds, and where these systems don't really matter. They're great aids. They help a lot. They help because they're a tool, but there are points where you just don't need them. They don't really serve a purpose. In fact, I get just as much um, purpose out of this mold box here than I do the synth base itself. I get so much work done with just this, and it just have this just ends up being a great way of making molds in the size and form factor that I want them to be in. But I can work entirely in a molding back and forth where I'm not using the synth base part or the stem for anything. I'm just molding between halves, like the bottom half and the top half, and I'm defining shapes, forms with those concepts that are just pretty intrinsic to two-part molding, where you have one half of one mold and one half of another, and you can change the way those molds work. You can make masters from those molds. There's a great deal of math that you could put into your work to figure out how to defeat shrinkage. The sky is really the limit if you learn how two-part molding works. But kind of to get away from that topic and back to maker's marks on the synth, you can physically modify a piece of metal in any number of ways. You could send this to a jeweler. You could, it wouldn't be your work, but at the same time,
right? It's your idea, right?
Maybe it's your idea, and you collaborated on it. I mean, give that jeweler a little bit of credit. Be like,
I did this and he helped me.
Sam's fine engraving helped me out with this, and just be like, I don't know, throw like a little S on the bottom of your key too for Sam's fine engraving. I don't know, but like honor people who help you out somehow. That's what I would do. But you can modify this. You can modify molds that you make out of this. You can make your library of molds contain the maker's mark, where your synth actually doesn't have any maker's mark on it. It can be left blank. So there's a lot that you can do there. It just really depends on what you're willing to mold into place, if that makes sense.
Fair. Archetype Keycap said, I think it's important to remember that the tools you choose to express your artwork are just that, tools. It's not really fair to say that one form of expression is more real solely based on the media. I agree with that. I think it's just a different way to do things, in a way, right? Yeah, I don't know. That's what I think. Oh man.
Shoot, I took my finger off the button.
Oh no.
I was talking.
What were you saying?
Oh, sorry.
Oh God.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I feel like Archetype brings up a valid point. It's important to remember that the tools that you choose to express your work in are just that, tools. There is a point where a tool is doing work, and it's important to know at what point that tool is doing work that you don't have to do. Even though you imagine it, you're still not doing it. But this isn't about what's real or what isn't. It's about everything that I've said regarding like an artist's labor is about the labor involved in kind of a comparative sense, and we lose that ability to be comparative when the media goes from something physical and real and I mean really real, like not saying that the abstraction of digital space is not real or experience, but if the power ever goes out, it doesn't exist anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't. Not that it hadn't existed, but it's ephemeral. It can evaporate just like that. There's a great amount of technology in between the artist and the media. There's a great deal of abstraction there, and it's just important for people to know what that is, and important to know how you're deriving certain kinds of value, and where people might get, confused about the differences between them. I don't think that anybody working in a purely 3D space should ever be, necessarily talked down to or vilified or anything like that. And there's some things that I've had to learn. I've been wrong a lot about 3D sculpting in general. I did 3D sculpting before, and I know what kind of tools exist there. And for a while, I was really upset when folks were bringing really complicated pieces of work into the scene, and to them, they get to work on it in like a screen size environment. They don't have to strain their eyes. They don't have to, go through the process of making their hand work in a very controlled way. So I felt really slighted when certain people were demanding as much value for their work as the people that I looked up to as a sculptor. It was hard to get past that. And I definitely know I've said some things that I would take back. I would apologize about. But I don't think it's about whether it's necessarily real or not, because once you make that piece and it's out, it's physical, it's very real. The work that you put into making it happen had an effect, and that's worth recognizing. It's worth seeing that that finished piece. And Archetype makes beautiful 3D printed stuff. I mean, some of the highest quality 3D printed small form objects I've ever come across have been Archetype pieces. There are other 3D printer makers that I do not agree make anything close to that, and should be staying well behind Archetype in terms of value and pricing. But again, I don't control all these things, and I'm not under the illusion that my word is law or anything like that. So
Of course. Oh, well.
yeah, it's totally worth saying what you said. Choosing to express artwork with a tool is, just the beginning, and the finished piece does say a lot about what the person went through to make it happen. And that is what's real, for sure.
Okay, changing with the topic. What's your favorite color, and why is it red?
Well, you see, red,
Yes.
to colorblind people, is various shades of dark gray or black.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very confusing color.
Okay.
Mixing red and black is the equivalent to everybody's brain. Anybody who can see in grayscale, which most people, like even colorblind people, have no issue with grayscale. If you were to remove their color sensing organ from their eye, they would still be able to see grayscale. There's very little evidence to say that humans see different values of grayscale, and every single color that's out there has a kind of grayscale value. If you take a bright and colorful candy wrapper and you smush it into a black and white photocopier,
Mm-hmm.
you get a pretty good idea of what that would look like in a grayscale
Right.
world.
Yeah.
And red is just incredibly interesting because it's so close to black without actually looking dark to us. It's bright, it's vibrant, it's poppy, it's kind of intense, right?
Yeah. Wait, do
And
you actually like red?
oh, I like all colors.
Oh no, but you have to pick one. What's your favorite color? Because
I
I was
can't.
like, I love red. I don't know if you see, but red it's
Right.
primary.
Yeah. And I see that you've got a red, black, and white motif, which is
Yeah.
interesting to me because if you grayscale that, it's very easily a shade of gray, black, and white. Whereas like if you were to like replace your red with a yellow, there would be much less even tonal distribution because the yellow is so close to white. It would almost look like white and black. And that's really
Makes
interesting.
sense.
And if you use blue, most like true blues, like blue in the sense of like I don't mean like cerulean or um oh my
Like
gosh, brain
oh,
work. Cobalt.
have you seen
Cobalt.
like have you seen the Pantone dark blue sea? It's like a
Yeah, yeah.
it's a very deep blue, almost purple.
Right. Yeah. You're verging on ultramarine there.
Oh yeah, ultramarine.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah. Yeah.
ultramarine.
And in that space, it's definitely black. Like you see it as blue, it's a vibrant color, but it's definitely black. So there's no distance in a grayscale between that and kind of like black. So there are other colors that are more akin to gray, and they just happen to be with oh god, why is my brain doing this? The complementary color, which is the opposite to it on the color wheel, of red is green, and it just so happens that green is another color that presents as a gray to like a vibrant green will be a gray,
Okay.
like
Okay.
very distinctive
Very.
gray, and green is interestingly the color that the human eye can see in the most value and variation. There are more tones of green available to the human eye than there are any other color, due to how we evolved as a species. So it being directly opposite, on the color wheel from red is just kind of, it kind of seems almost poetic to me because of how similarly they behave in the grayscale. Whereas a lot of other colors, they tend to bias black or white. And I think it's really interesting as well if you look or you think about people who are less able to view all colors, like colorblind individuals will tend to see one color as something else. And so they only ever get the perception that it's similar to other tones, if that makes sense. Yeah. So red is fascinating because
Red is
it
good.
has that.
Red is the best color. You hear it first. So Pierce said that accidental drops remind me to get better at sculpting again. Have you dropped a sculpt that you were so proud that you couldn't like save?
I have absolutely fucked up sculpts real bad. And one of the worst things that happened, it wasn't an accidental drop, but I sculpted something entirely perfect and I went to mold it and the silicon wouldn't cure over and over and over again. And on the 10th time, I just gave up and I resculpted the whole thing. And it was never as good as the original. I don't.
That
That
happened
was
with one of my sculpts. I don't know why it just doesn't cure properly, and I just gave up with it. So I'm redoing it, so it feels bad. I haven't I have dropped sculpts, but because I usually use hard, so they usually just get a bit dented. So I'm like, okay, I can fix it, but killing a whole sculpt, I'll feel so bad.
I was taking the meat Popsy skull.
Mm-hmm.
I crushed it 6 times when I
Oh
was
no.
making it.
Oh god.
And the last time I did it, I was like, I'm not gonna make any mistakes, but I gotta take this picture of it to show people on Instagram. And I dropped the freaking camera like right
No.
on top of it. And I'm like,
No.
I got so good at sculpting it as a result. I just I
Right.
was
I
like,
guess.
this is
I.
easy now.
That's the only good side, I guess. Oh
Yeah,
my
you
god.
get practice.
Joe Ferretti is asking about multi-batch color matching consistency. Got any tips?
Nope.
They suck. I suck color matching. I don't want to do color matching. It's so bad.
It's
I'm
not something like to talk about that process. I'd have to talk about things that are kind of like in depth.
yeah.
HungerWorkStudio. That's literally how I make my living. So I'm gonna have to pass on that. I'm sorry, guys.
Fair enough. That's fair enough. I don't have tips. Sorry, Joe. um. Oh, what's the cap with the highest failure rate?
The keycap with the highest failure rate that I've made was the hindsight. That's
The
the one with the highest failure rate. Yeah.
Okay. I don't have any of your caps in my collection. It feels bad. You don't make red caps enough. That's the problem.
So there's a funny thing about red,
Mm-hmm.
and it's
Come on.
so red is actually a very difficult color to make in resin and in plastic because to get it really vibrant, you run the risk of making your plastic very weak.
Really?
Because plastic does not like red.
Wow.
Plastic does not
Feels
like red.
bad, man.
It's not that bad. I mean, I've made off reds.
Nah.
Like
Off red, it's weak. I went some true like bright.
Well, your red isn't true red.
I know,
It's
like here.
orange.
No, like here, right? But like if you see my main logo, it's a 9. Well, yeah, it's almost right, but it's still red. I just want something like nice.
Well, fine. I mean that's something that we can work on. I mean, I did this guy with Joey Quinn some time ago. This is
it's a little cow. Looks like a cow.
This is a movie.
It's not gonna
come on, focus.
It's not
focus.
Like, nope. It's there we go. There we go. Pretty good.
Yeah, that was the Home of the Crave. Or no, Grazed and Confused is the name of this one. Home of the Crave was a meat Popsy skull I did in red, white, and blue. If you're looking for we've done lots of red Popsies. Come to think of it, we did gem tone reds. We did I'm Ron Man. That was that one.
Are they high?
Which was an Iron Man themed. Like, it's just, I guess, bad timing, to be quite honest.
Probably. Yeah. It is.
The more I think back about it, we don't do a lot of like super bright red stuff. Doesn't mean we couldn't give it a shot. I mean,
yeah. I mean, what do you think of mica powders? Do you usually use mica powders when you work on like colors?
I rarely use mica powder.
Really?
Yeah. Because it's just a powder. I mean, your color matching to
no, but you don't
at
need
that
to.
point.
no, but not like really color matching, just to experiment, because like sometimes it gives like a shiny aspect to it, right? So
Yeah,
that's
I did that experimenting for like
hmm
3-4 years. I know what mica powder can look like, and if you
yeah.
look at the one key that I referenced, the I'm Ron Man,
Okay,
that uses a
I'm looking at it.
reflective particulate
Like that.
um,
That's a really
to
nice red.
produce the red.
I'm looking at it. Really
Yeah,
nice red.
it's I've done it, and the reason why you don't see me doing it all the time is because it's just kind of like I want to give my customers more. They deserve to see some of the like the actual color mixing that we have, other than like this kind of ready-made, just dump it in and ooh, it's that color kind of stuff. I mean, that can be really cool, but does it match their key set well? Um, is it really all that creative for us? Is it making us excited? That's really important. I
Right.
still have to be excited about that,
That's fair enough.
um, just to get through the day. um, but like, here's a here's like a there's a lot more colors in here. The camera isn't really doing it justice, but these are
The
all
blue,
different
purple.
colors. There's actually like a really deep red in here that comes out as orange. It's the camera. Um,
What
but
what's that supposed to be?
oh, this is just a chip. So
Oh,
anytime we feel adventurous and we want to try something, we produce chips, and every chip has a test of
right.
what we can do with different materials. And I like it may not look like it, but these are all things that are normally clear,
Mm-hmm.
but when you add them to resin, they turn into a color.
Mm-hmm.
They don't work very well, and you can't tell, but like there's a lot of foaming happening in this material. So it was kind of it was an opportunity to test, but it really wouldn't do well in a keycap.
Fair enough. Yeah. um. Yeah. Um. So we talk about your pricing a bit. Your how you see your work. So we touch about ethical commissions, right? So you're open to all of them, right? I mean, wait,
Not yet.
no,
We're
sorry,
close
sorry,
now.
no. You're close now. But I think you had it open like for 10 minutes or something like that, right? Or a minute. I remember
It
seeing
was a
the
day.
ping. Oh, it was
It was
day?
a day. Yeah.
Really? Okay. Well, I was like too afraid to ask for a commission. Anyways, so collabs. You say you're open for collabs, right?
Yeah, collaborations. I definitely do collaborations with people, provided I have the time. Like I want to be able to commit to it, but again,
Right.
that's something that I think um, the other
But
person has to be as willing to work straight through it with me,
right,
and I think it works best in person, not
that's fair.
a distance thing.
Let's say like my friend has some set that he's making. It's about to enter a group buy, and he went just just a recolor one of his sculpts, for a raffle set basically. Would you be open to that sort of things?
I would be open to a commission
Okay.
when our commissions open back up for sure. A collaboration's a little different. A collaboration
Oh,
is
how
when
do you? Yeah, let's
there's
define
two people
collaboration. Yeah, let's define
who
collaboration.
have a a creative direction, and they're both inputting into it. Usually when somebody's like, "Oh, I want you to collab. Here's some chips, color match it." I'm doing all the work. Like it's a commission. It's not a collaboration. It might
Mm,
be a collaborative like promotion, maybe, if you want
yeah,
to call it a
yeah.
collaborative something, but yeah, that's a commission right there.
Okay. So, how would you define a collaborative work with you?
That would be something like what Death Caps and I did with Rev Thulu, or what I'm working with Prime Caps with on the Lullify.
Hmm.
Fug Thulu was a collaborative effort. Um, the Garbage King was a collaborative effort. There are some collaboration, and those were things that I called collaborations because I kept in close contact with those people, and not all of them were as collaborative as I would want.
Mm-hmm.
But both people have to have a strong amount of input into what the end product looks like, not just what it's colored. From start to finish, both people have kind of their hand. Both people are in the kitchen.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I can see that. Okay. That's fair. I was a bit confused about that personally. So yeah. Um. So yeah, I think we're almost over, at least for now. I think I learned a lot about you, and yeah. So, so there's two last questions. One of them is, how would you like to be remembered if you were to leave, the hobby?
Well, I hope Archetype doesn't hate me.
I don't think he does. He's
No,
very rude.
no.
He bullies me. He literally comes to my stream just to bully me. But I love that guy. I love Mick.
I no long. I take back everything that I said. I
It's
take back
fine.
all my humility. No. I mean, I would like. It's hard to say like I want to be remembered for something, because one of those things that I've learned is that there's a lot of people with very similar ideas. There's a lot of kindred spirits kind of like in this hobby, and I think all of them really deserve to be remembered. There's some things that I've done that I don't think that people should say somebody else did, for sure. Like I still have a little bit of an ego, a lot of bit of an ego. I've got an ego. But if there was something that I could impress upon others, I would really like for the community to try and find some kind of common inclusive ground for the arts moving forward. There has to be, there should be some kind of standard, because without standards, there's generally exploitation. I don't think that that's necessarily just an art world thing. I think people have seen exploitative behavior in keyboards and things. But like, don't lose that kind of grassroots mentality that you have neighbors and other like-minded people in this space. And if you all get together and you work hard at something, really cool things happen. That's the kind of spirit that I'd want to drive forward, if at all possible.
I feel like, after interviewing a couple of you guys already, it's honestly like fun to see like the different personalities that you guys bring. Like sometimes I'm like, all of you are like good people in general, but you have very different views in life. Some of them are more eccentric than others, but I honestly really like having to talk with you guys, getting to meet you better, right? So yeah, that I honestly appreciate you taking time of your day to chat with me a bit, right? Yeah.
It's been a fun night. I
Thank
I don't I've been cooped up here for a while. I think this is the first interview I've done in quite a few months.
Mhm.
And I felt really comfortable just talking with you. I think you're a great host. You ask good questions.
Thank you.
There's nothing that I'd say I'd want to have any different. So I really appreciate being here more than anything.
Thank you.
It's been lovely.
Oh, I really appreciate those words. All right. So to finish the night, the last question that I always ask is: do artisans belong on the keyboard or in a stand? There's only one right answer, by the way. Just letting you know. Oh god. Oh god. Okay, you know what? I'm out. God damn it.
You don't like artisans on a keyboard?
No. I mean,
What?
they're
Okay.
okay.
So this is gonna kill you.
Oh
But
god.
I took an entire when I was showing you that keyboard that I was gonna assemble and the parts of it. So that was on top of a desk, and on top of that was a pile of like really old artisans that I just picked up, and I was gonna sort them and put them into boxes, and I just brushed that all onto the floor. So now it's all on the floor now.
God.
I apologize.
Why you do these
But
things?
I swear that's I'm gonna clean it up. It's just gonna be after we're done.
Oh god. God damn it. Oh well. It's fine, I guess. For this time. But I think so far it's been half-half. Half of them has said stand and then half has said on the keyword. It's fine. But the correct answer
How are you gonna
it's
tell
understand.
who's casting the right fitment if it's not on the keyboard?
No. Okay, that's different. Because if you're out of proportion, they won't fit on the box. Right?
No, you can stay within the 18 by 18 easy.
True.
But
true.
if it doesn't stay on the stem, if it breaks your stem, if it
But I mean, it
pulls
can be
the-
super tall, right? Like if your measurement is at the keyboard, then you can have a super freaking tall cat, right? And that wouldn't fit the box.
Yeah, that's good.
No,
Break those glass ceilings.
no,
Break those
please,
glass ceilings.
no, please.
I like again. I'm just picking stuff up off my
Oh,
desk.
God.
Like at this point,
Oh
and
god,
there's
it hurts my
like,
soul. But okay.
it's just because I love actually having these things in my hand. Like part of it is the tactility. Like if you take away all of the physical attractive, like the physical qualities about this that's attractive, like if you never touch or utilize a key that was designed to be pressed,
I mean,
you're
I touched
totally
him the
missing
first
out.
time. I mean, I touched him the first time only. Yeah, I'm like, oh yeah, that looks so nice. Then put it on the box so I can display it nicely enough, right? I don't know. That's just me.
But like part of the reason why the bongo has the two hands right here is so like it cradles your finger when you push in, and so it's like it's hugging your finger. That's intentional.
Really?
Yes, that is intentional.
Hmm.
The reason
Let's
why the
ask Leon.
ears.
Let's ask
the
Leon.
Sure.
Invite him over. Tell him
Invite
to come
Liam
over.
over.
Yeah. Oh, not now,
well,
but another time.
yeah, sometime. But I can tell you with like most of the keys that the first key that I ever made that was a resin cast thing was the handicap. And that was literally a hand, so you could give it a high five. You could be like bam bam bam. That was the point.
My head
Point.
my head
It's
hurts
for.
right now. Oh god. Oh god. Anyways, all right. That was it for today, guys. Thank you so much, Ben, for coming over here. So yeah. Any last words?
Don't listen to anybody who tells you to keep your artisans in a box.
Oh god.
But keep watching this
Oh
stream.
god. Oh god. Why? Nope. I'm not changing my mind. I'm sorry. I won't.
Change your mind.
Nope. I'm gonna be disturbed. No. I'm sorry, guys. All right, boys. Take care. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone. Oh wait, I don't have the outro scene. Oh my god. Oh god, I'm sorry. It's very
scream.
Sculpt.
Autistic screeching.
Yeah. 1, 2, 3. Goodbye, boys.
I can't.